everybody, how you doing? Welcome to Shadow at Night, live for Friday, October the 25th, 2024. And on the show tonight, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith wants to make free speech an actual thing, at least in that province going forward. She did a video announcement yesterday with her Minister of Justice, Attorney General Mickey Amory. Now, I know a lot of you guys, especially in Alberta, and those who followed the Coutts trial, don't like the two of them very much, especially Amory, because as the Minister of Justice, you think he could have gotten himself involved in an ongoing trial. He could not. There are certain laws in this country that simply state you cannot, as a politician, get involved in active or any kind of judicial proceedings whatsoever. You can't tamper in court cases. That's what they do in banana republics. That's the Justin Trudeau way of doing things. SNC Lavalin, remember? So I know, as bad as things got with that Coutts trial, there was nothing any elected official could have done, officially and even unofficially, because remember that to say something unofficially behind closed doors with no cameras rolling, no tape recorders, nothing like that, you still got people saying, he directed me, because you can't trust the bureaucracy. He directed me to get involved in that court case, because you know there's NDP, socialist bureaucrats all over the place who want nothing more than to see Danielle Smith and the UCP in Alberta go down in flames. And that's something many of us forget, because we're talking in this echo chamber, and we forget there's this other side, this big, huge, evil, monolithic side. Archbishop, what's his last name again? Archbishop, give me 2 seconds here. Vigano penned an open letter to American Catholics today talking about the evils of Kamala Harris. We're going to read that letter for you in just a couple of minutes here on the Shadow at Night live stream. Forgive my seeming confusion here, but I was running around all day and didn't have a lot of time. And there's not a lot of real good news today. This is what they call a slow news day. So I did piece together a show for you guys tonight. Going back a couple of days, even going back to an episode last week. And there are a couple of things that you definitely do need to know about. And I know the left-wing corporate media right now is talking about immigration, and all of the panels with the hackneyed commentators are talking about what's going to happen with Justin Trudeau. I listened to Peter Mansbridge's podcast today. It's called Good Talk, and it's so left-wing, it's not even funny. But the funny thing about it is they think they're coming from the center. That's how bad it actually is. They are absolutely so far left in their thinking. It's amazing to me. And of course, Pierre Poilievre is evil, 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 evil. Now, there's a lot of people out there, including many YouTube, what am I going to call them? Independent journalists, I guess. I don't know. Political commentators, people like Mr. Sunshine Baby and Moose on the Loose and those guys who like to use Vassy Kapelos on CTV as this holy figure of the media, this one lone figure in the media who stands up for both sides of the story. But ultimately speaking, she is not. She may ask some difficult questions occasionally, but she's also very left-leaning. And I'm going to prove it to you guys in a couple of minutes. The show is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com. CanadaNanoSilver.com appearing at the Saskatoon Health Expo this weekend, tomorrow 10 till 6 and Sunday from 10 till 5. And we're going to tell you more about that a little bit later on as well. All right, here is the video message recorded yesterday, put out yesterday by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith regarding censorship in her province. And look at how they're tackling this. I think this is ingenious.
And this is Alberta's Justice Minister Mickey Amory. We'd like to share with you a new initiative by our government to better protect freedom of speech and expression. Albertans value free speech, the right to freely express our beliefs without being censored by others, most especially by government. A diversity of opinions and beliefs is one of the hallmarks of a free, healthy, and democratic society. Many of the greatest ideas and advancements in history started out as non-conventional and controversial ideas that became popular and mainstream only after brave women and men were able to convince their fellow citizens of their value.
Albertans should never be discouraged from holding a wide array of political, ideological, and social views, or from expressing their opinions on all kinds of topics. Fair-minded and reasonable disagreements and debate are essential to a healthy public discourse, because they allow for individuals to hear all sides of a debate before making their own judgments as to what they believe to be true. The importance of free speech and the marketplace of ideas to healthy democracies is nothing new, and yet there are some troubling trends that we're seeing around the world, where several governments and governing bodies believe it is appropriate for them to determine what is true and what is misinformation, and to restrict the speech of those who disagree with them.
Sadly, we've seen this trend in Canada over the last several years as professional colleges and other regulating bodies have been exerting their authority far beyond their legitimate mandate by attempting to regulate the personal beliefs and political opinions of the doctors, lawyers, psychologists, and other professionals they oversee. The Law Society of Alberta and the College of Physicians and Surgeons, as examples, have a very important role to play. They protect the public interest by setting standards of competence, so Albertans can be confident in the services professionals provide. They also set standards of conduct, integrity, and financial governance, ensuring that professionals uphold the trust placed in them and don't misuse their positions to take advantage of others. Those are the appropriate responsibilities of professional regulatory bodies. However, what professional governing bodies must not involve themselves in is regulating the speech and beliefs of their members outside of their professional duties. What a doctor or lawyer believes or says about politics or religion is not a reflection of their competency to practice medicine or law.
We would like to share with you some troubling examples of what we've observed across the country in this regard. A nurse facing discipline for making comments on Facebook critical of the care her grandfather received at a long-term care facility had to pay over $20,000 in fines and costs. Now, eventually, that decision was overturned, but she had to fight all the way to the Court of Appeal to do so. A doctor who spoke in church and sent a letter to her archbishop about the way that communion was performed in her church was investigated and issued a caution by her professional regulator after another churchgoer complained that the doctor hadn't mentioned the alleged health risks of the communion procedure. The Law Society of Ontario established a requirement that all lawyers create a so-called statement of principles, which compels lawyers to state their commitment to various ideological values and principles dictated by the regulator. In a case that many of you may be familiar with, Alberta's own Dr. Jordan Peterson, a licensed Ontario psychologist and world-renowned author and philosopher, is being forced by his regulatory body into social media re-education for controversial political comments he made on Twitter that had nothing to do with his practice as a psychologist and were based on complaints from people who had never been his patients and who he had never met. In Alberta, many professionals have been investigated and/or disciplined for expressing their political or policy opinions outside of their professional practice. They're often subjected to a long, burdensome, and expensive disciplinary process based on bad faith complaints from people they have never dealt with professionally, where they're forced to waste months and years of their life and spend large amounts of their personal savings in defending themselves, even if the complaint is ultimately dismissed.
In our UCP government's view, it is not appropriate for this government or any professional regulatory body to compel Albertans to some official version of truth. George Orwell's fictional 1984 should remain fiction. To ensure the government of Alberta better respects the rights of Albertans, we will introduce amendments to the Alberta Bill of Rights this fall, as previously announced. And to ensure our professional regulators stay within their mandates, our government is launching a review of Alberta's regulated professions to ensure the freedom of speech, expression, and belief of their members is adequately protected. And we will bring legislative changes next year to ensure that professional regulatory bodies are limited to regulating their members' professional competence and conduct, and not their speech.
But before we make any legislative changes in this regard, we will be engaging with Alberta's professional regulatory bodies and professionals to gather their input. We will be gathering information on whether regulatory oversight is going beyond professional competence and conduct in areas related to freedom of belief, opinion and expression, mandatory training not related to professional competence, and vexatious and bad faith complaints, amongst other issues.
Albertans must have confidence in the competence and ethical practice of regulated professionals, and regulated professionals must also have the freedom to hold and express their personal beliefs and opinions, most especially in situations outside their professional role. And that is what this review will be about. Once this consultation is complete, our government will identify any needed legislative changes necessary to achieve these objectives.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. I'm not sure if they included in there just the average person who works for an oil company or the corner store down the street. Let's just say that Joe, who works as the weekend clerk at Bob's Nickel and Dime, goes streaking down McLeod Trail in Calgary. And then, of course, he gets arrested, gets hauled in, and comes back to work on Monday like nothing happened. Would you fire him? He can still do his job, okay? There's got to be a level that we can somehow agree upon, right? This is almost like the hate speech thing. Hate to one person is this, hate to another person is that. But if I'm a boss and I'm running a company and somebody does something extremely embarrassing and I don't want that person to be associated with my company anymore, then I got to be able to say, look, man, I don't want you embarrassing me in public anymore. But where do you draw that line? It's very interesting. Now, having said that, for a doctor to say something political or a lawyer to say something political on social media and then be called on the carpet for it by a regulatory body is absolutely outrageous. But it's difficult to draw that line. I think this is a good forward step, but I think it really needs to be studied and definitely amended several times over so that we get it right. That's something you got to be pragmatic about this. You can't just say this and that's, you can't talk anymore, or you can talk however much you want. Now, I'm a believer in free speech. Absolutely, I am. But I'm also not a believer in violence. So there's a fine line. There's a very fine line. Maybe you write a list of conditions. All right. So five and dime guy, you went streaking. That's against my personal code of ethics. And so I'm going to have to fire you. Does this extend to that? If a picture of said employee streaking down McLeod Trail happens to appear on social media, that is. Am I reading too much into it? I don't even think I am. Not in this day and age. All right. Vassy Kapelos. There's a lot of internet pundits. Let's call them internet pundits, political pundits, amateur political pundits who believe that Vassy Kapelos is the next coming. She's on the left-wing corporate media. Let's not forget. Here's a panel, this front bench, as she calls it. Here's a panel that she had the other day that included Christy Clark, former premier of British Columbia, and possible Liberal leader going forward. She's mentioned earlier this week she wants to throw her hat in the ring, or at least be in the conversation for the Liberal leadership of Canada, should Justin Trudeau decide he wants to step down. Also on this panel, Gary Dewar, the former premier of Manitoba, and then we have a conservative on there, Lisa Raitt. She's no longer in office. And I think they all work for green consulting firms or banks, big banks. Anyway, I want you to see here what Vassy lets Christy Clark get away with. It's appalling.
You happy Thursday. I don't think anyone on this panel is going to be surprised that I have to start with Christy, who gave me a bit of a heart attack a few days ago at the prospect of losing a front bench panelist. I'm going to start straight up and direct with you, Christy. What's going on? Are you potentially throwing your hat in the ring if Mr. Trudeau were to step aside?
Well, I can tell you, Vassy, that I got a lot of emails from a lot of people saying, hey, we love you with Vassy on CTV, don't go. Just like from across the country. It's really been quite amazing. Here's my view on it. The Prime Minister has decided he wants to stay. He's going to stay. He's going to run in the next election. And I have never said from the minute I left politics that I was going to close the door on politics forever. But there's no job open. Pierre Poilievre will become the Prime Minister, a man who has never run anything in his life and whose policy book appears to consist of 3 slogans he repeats nonstop. And I think that kind of easy sleight of hand, that division and divisiveness is terrible for our country. So
at this stage of the game, Vassy needs to cut in on Christie and say, all right, let's stay on topic here. We're talking about the Liberal leadership here. We're talking about the revolt in the cabinet or the caucus that happened this week. And you're talking about Pierre Poilievre being this mean little man who's never run anything and is spreading division across the country. That's absolutely, completely, and totally unacceptable in this conversation. But Vassy just lets her get away with it.
I would say to Liberals, let's get focused and let's get to work.
I'm going to let Lisa respond in a second. I'm just going to ask you one follow-up. Do you think...
And by the way, Lisa never did respond. As the Conservative on the panel, she should have responded. She did not
Christie,
respond.
that Justin Trudeau should stay as leader, or do you think he should go?
I think he has the right to stay. His caucus has so far, and we saw this today, maintained confidence in him. The party maintains confidence in him. And he's the leader of the party. He says he's going to run. And Liberals across the country need to support him in doing that. Otherwise, I mean, keep your eyes on the prize, folks. We can end up with a Pierre Poilievre government. And he would take, you know, in 4 years, he could do a lot to change this country in ways that we could never get back.
So Lisa, I'll bring that point to you because in my conversations with people who were in caucus yesterday, Christie, I want to ask you about that because I thought one of the more, candid.
That's the second time. And this is, I edited this down, you guys. That's the second time Christie is completely and totally misrepresented Pierre Poilievre, who's not even supposed to be in this conversation, and Vassy lets her get away with it. Let's
conversations
continue.
That I've had on air with caucus members, it was last night with Ken Hardy, who was pretty, blunt about the caucus's desire to see a proposition put before them and Canadians about why, in a change election, voters should stick with the Liberals. Like, what more beyond what we've already done are we going to do to improve your lives? His assessment was that they had not yet done that in any capacity for either caucus or Canadians. Do you think they need to? And how urgently? And how much change does it in itself need to signify?
Well, I think that they all need to. I think all three parties are in some way not speaking to Canadians. I mean, you've got Poilievre who just has these three slogans, and it's just there's no plan, there's no big idea, there's no evidence that he could ever get any of that sort of thing done. It's just divide, divide, divide. And then for sure the Liberals have got to get focused on talking to people where they are about what's going on in their lives right now. So that is thinking about the cost of living, thinking about lower taxes for people across the country, improving the investment climate, growing the...
It sounds like she's running for the Liberal leadership on this panel where she is supposed to be talking about something completely different. I'm going to leave that one right there, as all the TV pundits say. Well, we'll have to leave it there for now. It's absolutely abominable behavior by Christy Clark. But worse, as the panelists were talking, the host is supposed to govern them and stop them or question them on the things they say. And Vassy sometimes does it. But in this particular case, she did not, and that's very disappointing. And that's not the first time we've seen that. So let's not hold any left-wing corporate media journalists up on some idol and say, oh my God, you have to watch this. Because at the very least, she is fallible and letting these people get away with murder. And worse, this is what happens sometimes. You become friends with these people. And when you become friends, or at least friendly with these people, you let them get away with more than they should be able to get away with. All right, let's talk about climate change. What does Vassy Kapelos say about climate change? She says, and this is more than once, I've seen her say this far more than one time, that she believes that it is an absolute existential threat to the very existence of humans. She even does panels about it.
This evening, former Alberta Premier Alison Redford. She's now the principal at the Redford Group. Former Manitoba Premier Gary Dewar. He's now a director of the Climate Group and a senior business advisor at Dentons. And former Nova Scotia Premier Darrell Dexter. He's now vice chair of Global Public Affairs. Hi, everybody. Really nice to see you tonight. I appreciate you making the time. Gary, I'll start with you. As I read out one of your titles there as the director of Climate Group, I thought it was an interesting day, just given all these advisories, to talk about the debate around climate change and really how much we do and what we do to address it. Do you think that Mr. Poilievre's message is resonating given the current, cost of living crisis a lot of people are facing?
Well, I think the message on climate is being delivered every hour in our neighborhood of North America. And certainly I was on a climate board call this morning. And, you know, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a wonderful report out of the Pew Research Group in the United States when I was ambassador that called the boreal forest in Canada the lungs of North America. And certainly that is not the situation today. But it's not just the wildfires, which are, as you stated, are crossing borders and moving south as we speak. It's also the extreme heat in Texas.
She's not stopping him and making him prove that these extreme weather events, which, by the way, have happened since the beginning of time, are because of man-made climate change. She is going along with it. She's got a confirmation bias that it's absolutely real, and it must be causing all of these catastrophic weather events. Let's continue.
Texas, that's a situation with hurricanes in Florida and other places. And so there's a lot of weather-related experiences people are having that are raising.
This guy here has been this is my opinion. All right. Gary Dewar, he's been a professional scam artist for his entire lifetime. For those of you who lived in Manitoba during the late 90s and the early 2000s, I give to you the MTX scandal that he was definitely involved in. May have even started the damn thing. It was awful. Him and Greg Selinger, who was the finance minister at the time. And now he's talking about all of these weather events that we've been hearing about for our entire lives, but now they're somehow tied to climate change, but never offer any proof. Vassy, if you want to have a really good climate discussion, she talks about it like it's settled already, which I find annoying because it's never been settled. If you want to really have a good climate debate, you bring on one of your best scientists or maybe one of these people from the Pew Research Center or Gary Dewar for that matter. And this guy, Patrick Moore, who is one of the founders of Greenpeace. Listen to this guy talk.
Why are you here?
Well, one of my missions is to turn on its head the idea that carbon dioxide is a pollutant and somehow dangerous, when in fact it is the most important nutrient for all life on Earth, and without it this would be a dead planet. So I say not only is carbon dioxide good, it is essential, and it's a good thing that we are putting some more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because it was running low before we came along.
CO2, we know its benefits for plants, but it is a known greenhouse gas, and we're pumping too much of it in, leading to global warming.
Well, actually, it may be a known greenhouse gas, but it's not known how strong it is in terms of changing the Earth's temperature. And so far in this century, there has been zero warming from a statistically significant basis, and the UK Met Office says so, yet 1/3 of all human CO2 emissions have been put into the atmosphere in the last 18 years. So it doesn't look like a lockstep causal relationship between increasing CO2 and warming of the Earth.
Are you seriously suggesting we should be pumping more stuff in, polluting the Earth more, building more coal-fired power stations just so we can make sure that the CO2 levels are good?
No, I'm not, because we're putting plenty of CO2 into the atmosphere. We don't need to do it this quickly, but if we bring it up to a higher level than it is today, we will get immediately an increase in the growth of crops and trees, which is not a bad thing. In the long run, though, it doesn't matter if we bring it down quite a bit. And so that's why I'm supportive of nuclear energy and of natural gas. This tendency to go in the rich countries to wind and solar is a giant waste of money. Those wind farms will rust in place, and there is no fun to decommission them when they either wear out or we decide how ridiculous it is to spend so much money for so little electricity that isn't even reliable.
What are you saying about energy policy now to the ideas of decarbonisation to cut? Is everyone wrong?
Yes, they're wrong if they are actually basing their energy policy on decarbonization. They're not wrong to base their energy policy on cost effectiveness, on pollution control, which is why moving from coal to gas makes sense if you have it. But India has coal, and India has 300 million people with no electricity. What do we expect them to do? Of course they're going to build coal plants, but India is also building a lot more nuclear plants than the UK is right now, and it doesn't have the emissions of a coal plant. And China is building huge hydroelectric dams, which don't have the emissions of coal plants. So many of these countries are doing their bit without wasting all this money on wind and solar energy, which is unreliable and prohibitively expensive in the long run.
Why is this consensus out there?
Look, if we had definitive proof that CO2 was causing serious problems and we could prove it, don't you think they would write that down on a piece of paper somewhere so people could read it? They don't have definitive proof, period, in science. I'm a student of the philosophy and history of science, and I know that the scientific method has not been applied in such a way as to prove that carbon dioxide is causing the Earth to warm.
Do you think in a few years, say 50 years from now, people go, that was a really stupid period in our history when we tried to change all our energy policies to cut this gas?
I am firmly of the belief that the future will show that this whole hysteria over climate change was a complete fabrication.
But of course, he is an absolute outcast in the environment world now. He's a heretic. The Shadow at Night live stream is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, CanadaNanoSilver.com. Look at all these amazing products down here. You got the facial serum, you got the immune gummies, the naked bandage, the Nano Silver gel pump and the liquid, natural sinus relief, the Recover muscle cream, all those great silver lozenges in those fantastic flavors, the silver moisture sprayer, the skin cream in multiple scents. You got the tooth gel and several different kinds of toothpaste, all powered with SilverCeutical technology. And this weekend, Kevin and Anna from CanadaNanoSilver.com are at the Saskatoon Wellness Expo tomorrow between 10 and 6. This is going to be Saskatoon Prairieland Park tomorrow between 10 and 6, and then Sunday between 10 and 5. And Kev was so excited today, he took a 5-minute video walking through the hall of Prairieland Park there, where his booth is set up and how it's set up, and they've got some photo examples of how the nano silver gel works so well for healing purposes and burn purposes and whatnot. And he wanted me to play the video, but it was like 7 minutes long. So I'll try and edit it, but I couldn't edit it all together in a short amount of time. So I said, Kev, I am definitely going to mention that you're there this weekend at the Saskatoon Health and Wellness Expo tomorrow and Sunday at Saskatoon Prairieland Park. He hopes to see you guys there, pick up some product, maybe win some prizes as well. All right, who is here tonight? Robert and Kevin and Lucette and Catherine, Bob, Ellen, Christina, Justin, M and E Smith are watching on YouTube tonight. Howard's watching on Facebook. Robert's watching on Facebook. I think somebody mentioned in the comments earlier, show me a premier who didn't push masks and the shot. And you were looking right at her as she was talking on the screen. Danielle Smith never did any of that. She wasn't in power at that time. Now, having said that, you have to ask yourself, would she have if she were? This is tough. Politics is a vicious game. And at that time, regardless of how many of us were out there, those who just did not buy any of the crap, we didn't get indoctrinated, we weren't part of the sheep herd. Most Canadians were. They fell for it hook, line, and sinker. So if you're a politician and you're coming out against any of those recommendations, remember, everybody was doing it. And if you didn't go along with it as a politician, you may as well kiss your career goodbye and be labeled as wackadoo for the rest of your life. So would she have done it? Would she have stuck to her guns and her principles? I don't think so. She's a politician. Having said that, she's been through a lot these past couple of years as premier, because she has stuck up for a lot of what we believe to be right in the past couple of years. She has taken a lot of heat, not just in Alberta, but across the country. She has faced down the Trudeau government over and over and over again. Can you tell me any other premiers, provincial premiers, who have done anything like that? Anybody who has had the balls to stand up to that turd? I can't name one of them. So I'm not going to sit here and say that she is perfect. I'm not, because she's not. And she'd probably be the first one to stand up and say, I'm not perfect. but she's done a hell of a lot more than any other elected official in this country has in terms of standing up to the nonsense. Definitely. Definitely. All right, Kamala Harris. Is she going to win? Is Kamala Harris going to win this election? It looks like Trump is getting set to take over the lead in the popular vote, nationally speaking. If a Republican wins the national vote, it's a landslide. Why? Because California always votes so heavily for Democrats, and New York as well. These are two of the most populous states in the United States, right? But if a Republican wins the national vote, it's going to be a landslide. This could be in the area of 330, 340 electoral college votes for Donald Trump, leaving Kamala Harris way, way, way behind. Somebody tracked down Mel Gibson. It looks like Mel Fly's commercial these days. Somebody tracked down Mel Gibson in an airport and just started talking to him. Now, if this guy were passing me by in an airport or even a sidewalk, I wouldn't know it was Mel Gibson. You have to watch a couple of, like, for a few seconds and go, oh, that's Mel Gibson. Definitely. Watch this.
VP, are you, the president is being voted on.
Are you back in there?
In days.
VP Harris?
Oh, man, that's a big question.
Or Trump?
I don't think it's going to surprise anyone who I vote for.
I'm going to guess
Trump.
Trump. Is that a bad guess?
I think it's a pretty good guess.
What do you think the world will be like in the second term? With President with the
I know what it'll be like if we let her in,
Yeah.
Oh, really?
and that ain't good.
Yeah.
Miserable track record.
Which way?
Appalling track record. No policies to speak of.
Yeah. And the border, right?
And she's got the IQ of a fence post.
And she won't fix the border.
Nope.
The IQ of a fence post. Thank you, Mel, for that. All right, they've been going hard on Elon Musk. You know that Donald Trump has formed this Super Friends dream team around him, right? He's got Tulsi Gabbard, he's got RFK Jr., he's got Elon Musk, and they're all going to be involved. If Trump does win the election, they're all going to be involved in some way in his presidency going forward. I think RFK Jr. wants the health file. I think Elon, they've been asking him to take over a government efficiency role. Tulsi may be something to do with the military. So the left wing has obviously been losing their minds about this Trump dream team. Here's a video that Keith Olbermann, former disgraced sportscaster, released today. This guy is absolutely
Edition of the Friday Countdown podcast. It is absolutely essential for the United States government to immediately sever all connections to Elon Musk and his technological operations, if need be, to seize his assets, including SpaceX, Starlink, and Twitter X, and if need be, detain him, deport him, or take other actions against him. After the Wall Street Journal broke an extraordinary story on Thursday night, to quote it, Elon Musk, the world's richest man and a linchpin of U.S. space efforts, has been in regular contact with Russian President Vladimir Putin since late 2022. The discussions, confirmed by several current and former U.S., European, and Russian officials, touch on personal topics, business, and geopolitical tensions. The journal goes on to report that favors have been asked for the Chinese dictator that Starlink not be used over Taiwan, related from the Chinese dictator in some way to Putin and on to Musk, and that Musk's contact has continued with Putin into this year. Also, you will note the timeline here suggests that Musk only bought Twitter X after his conversations with Putin began, and that there were threats made against Musk's businesses and implicitly against Musk by the Russians. The full details in a startling bulletin edition of the Countdown Friday podcast, now live wherever you.
Yeah. All right. So look, I'm seeing in the comments here, I don't trust Musk completely. I don't trust Trump completely. I don't. Yeah, I get it. And this is what I've been saying to you guys for a while now, and that is that it's one cabal versus another. And there may be a third one in there as well that we're not aware of. Or it could be an overmind, right? Maybe the big guy, the gray pope on the top of all of this, is just having some fun. It's just saying, all right, let's mix them up. I'm bored. I want some action. I don't know. But we've been living in a cabal all of our lives. We like that cabal because we have the illusion of freedom. That is what Elon Musk represents, in my opinion. In my opinion, I might be way off the mark here. That is what Donald Trump represents. That's what RFK Jr. represents. All this left, right stuff, left, right. All of the Democrats who have now become Republicans because of the political shift, the ideological shift, the Overton window moving so far to the left and taking the Democratic Party with it. The Democratic Party never used to be like this. But now they're like crazy left-wing freaks who want to like rip your throat out. Figuratively speaking, of course, if you don't buy into their ideological rhetoric. It's gotten that bad, right? So look what they're trying to do to Musk now that this report comes out. Top stories, just in a Google search. X, Elon Musk. That's what I typed into the Google search. This is what came up from NPR. 2 years in, Trump surrogate Elon Musk has remade X as a conservative megaphone. Elon Musk is now X's biggest promoter of anti-immigrant conspiracies. Elon Musk in contact with Putin deputy known for pushing fake news. Elon Musk's X further squeezes developers with apparent new API fees. Elon is evil. So that's what they're talking about. Elon, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump, and probably Tucker Carlson. Recently, Kamala Harris came out and called Donald Trump a Nazi. Maybe not a Nazi. No, she compared him to Hitler. That was it. And of course, because we're so used to hearing that, it just kind of rolls off our back. But then Trump called her a fascist on some interview he was doing a couple of days ago. And by the way, Trump did the Joe Rogan podcast today. Probably going to get released later on tonight, maybe tomorrow. It should be interesting. I'm kind of anxious to hear it. Anyway, Trump called Kamala a fascist the other day, and the left lost their minds. In the meantime, this 94-year-old Holocaust survivor spoke out today regarding Kamala Harris's accusation on Trump being like Hitler. Watch this.
My name is Jerry Wartsky. I'm 94 years old and survivor of Auschwitz and the death marches. Adolf Hitler invaded Poland when I was 9 years old. He murdered my parents and most of our family. I know more about Hitler than Kamala will ever know in 1,000 lifetimes. For her to accuse President Trump of being like Hitler is the worst thing I've ever heard in my 75 years living in the United States. I know President Trump, and he would never say this, and Kamala Harris knows this. She owes my parents and everybody else who was murdered by Hitler an apology for repeating this lie.
Why should the Jewish people support President Trump?
Because he's a mensch. I believe that President Trump is definitely going to be good for Israel, because in everything that he's done up to now was in favor. He never double-crossed anyone, and he never showed any weakness. Watching President Trump pray for the hostages at the Ohel and getting to spend time with him so meaningful. He has always stood with the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
All right. So there's many of you watching this right now and probably thinking, but this. And yes, I totally understand that. You see, the great Pope so magnificently managed to divide us that there's a lot of crossover in the division now, right? And so there's a lot of people whose heads are exploding or they're short-circuiting. But if you stand with the Jewish people and you stand with Trump, that means you stand with the Zionists. And that means that you're pro-Palestinian? It's very difficult to comprehend all of this nonsense, right? If I believe in this, I can't believe in that. But if I believe this, then I absolutely have to believe that. No. You take it on a case by case by case basis. This is freedom of thought, my friends. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech. I'm getting back to freedom of speech for just a moment here. Rebel News, Sheila Gunn Reid did a pretty good piece today on this committee. The House of Commons Ethics Committee, which was sitting down today with representatives from all the big social media. And this is the headline here. Despicable and incredulous X's rep at Commons Ethics Committee drives NDP MP Matthew Green bonkers. The head of government affairs in Canada and the U.S. for the Elon Musk-owned social media platform calmly pushed back against allegations of political engagement by the organization from Liberal and NDP MPs on the House of Commons Ethics Committee. During the committee hearing, Liberal MPs Ikra Khalid, who's probably the biggest one for point of order, and Anthony Housefather conflated X's support of a conservative candidate's free speech lawsuit against a Canadian university with a political campaign donation. The committee heard from representatives of 4 major social media companies: TikTok, Meta, that's Facebook and Instagram, Google, which controls YouTube, and X, Thursday, on efforts to combat misinformation on the platforms. And this is one of the X posts she made. The beclowning continues. Liberal MP Andrew Housefather it's Anthony Housefather joins fellow Liberal MP Ikra Khalid in indicating he does not know the difference between a political donation and X funding a free speech lawsuit. Let's watch this.
We would welcome you to use the service to speak about your challenges and your positions.
Okay, now that you have at least acknowledged that you're funding a Canadian political candidate's legal challenge, would you be able to disclose to the committee, would you agree to disclose to the committee what number of political candidates in Canada you are funding legal challenges from, and any supporting documents related to the costs that you have incurred related to those legal challenges?
I'm happy to take the request back to our legal team. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
This Housefather guy, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Matthew Green is the NDP MP for Hamilton Centre. This guy is really hardcore Marxist. He accused X's Wilfredo Fernandez, head of government affairs, United States of America and Canada, of allowing misinformation which commented race riots in the United Kingdom to be posted on the platform. Oops. Yeah, Tommy Robinson got arrested apparently in the UK and is being held even now by the police. They searched his house and his phone without a warrant. Ooh. Anyway, here's that video.
Mr. Fernandez, are you familiar with the Center for Countering Digital Hate?
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez, just for the record again, what's your role with X?
I'm a director. I head our government affairs and public policy in the United States and Canada.
So this would be directly in your purview. Are you aware of the report entitled "Social Media's Role in the UK Riots: Policy Responses and Solutions"?
No, I'm not.
Well, I'll give you some background. On July 29, 2024, there was a mass stabbing at a children's dance class in Southport, United Kingdom. 3 children died. Immediately following news of the attack, false information about the attacker's identity spread on social media alongside calls for action and violence. The next day, hundreds of people gathered outside a Southport mosque and hurled petrol bombs, bricks, and anti-Muslim abuse motivated by false information spread online that the attacker had been named, and I won't even rename it because I don't want to boost it anymore, and was both a Muslim and an asylum seeker. Acts of violence and public disorder, much of it featured anti-Muslim and anti-migrant sentiment, soon spread around the country. Now, posts containing the fake name were promoted by users using platform algorithms and recommended features. The Institute for Strategic Dialogue found that X featured the false name in its trending in the UK promotions, suggesting it to users in the What's Happening sidebar. Far-right figures with millions of followers capitalized on false claims that the attacker was an asylum seeker, spreading the falsehood further into the massive following bases. Now, one platform stood out. It was yours. It was X. And the owner, which we identified already, Mr. Elon Musk, shared false information about the situation to his 195 million followers and made a show of attacking the UK's government response to the outbreak of violence. Rather than ensuring risk and illegal content were mitigated on his platform, Musk recklessly promoted the notion of an impending civil war in the UK, Mr. Fernandez. And yet your company, X, refuses to sign on to a declaration on misinformation, on the practice of disinformation. What do you have to say about that, Mr. Fernandez?
About what in particular, sir?
About the fact that your platform was responsible for misinformation about the false name of a person who was identified as Muslim and an asylum seeker that reached potentially 1.7 billion people. Mr. Fernandez, out of all of the people here, X is the only company that refused to sign on to a code of practice on disinformation. And your owner, who is currently on the campaign trail with Donald Trump in a hyper-partisan role of X, contrary to your testimony at this committee, is responsible for this. What do you have to say about that to the people who were targeted in the UK, sir?
So we have clear policies on hate, abuse, and harassment. In the first half of this year, we suspended over 1.1 million accounts under these policies, removed over 2.2 million posts, and actioned an additional 5.3 million posts under hate, abuse, and harassment. So we do take it seriously. We do act on it. And I'm happy to follow up more on
the
the
research, particularly relating to the UK riots. When I say riots, I need you to go back and look at this. Look at the work that your company is involved in on the streets, creating chaos and violence by far-right extremists. The initial report gave an analysis, determined that X was a significant platform in the unrest. And I quote, the X platform is accounting for roughly 50% of all the public referrals of online content, double the proportion of its next largest platform. The CCDH quantified the reach that far-right influence has, spreading hate and false information garnered on X in the aftermath of the attack, facilitated by your blue tick promotion feature and enabled by the proprietor's decision to reinstate previously banned accounts. They also discovered in this report, sir, that X—
Okay, we're not going to go on any further with that because my head's about to explode. Basically, what this guy is saying is he does not like to hear the other side. Look, when we talk about X, we're talking about a platform that truly represents both sides of the equation, all sides of the equation, actually. And I can tell you how I know that. Because whenever I open up that app on my phone, my head wants to explode. From all of the far left propaganda, nonsense, and crap that you have to wade through just to come up with some reasonable take on what's going on in the world today, it's absolutely amazing. But this guy is sitting there saying, well, you far-right commenters are spreading hate and fear and riots. But I guess he doesn't notice the same thing about his side. That's the beauty of having public discourse and allowing all points of view on the same platform. Right? But and he said, your platform is the only one here that refused to sign on to the agreement. Wow. The agreement means that I have to censor what you want me to censor. Because clearly the organization he was talking about there is a left-wing organization. All of the regulatory organizations, public or private, in pretty much all the Western countries have been taken over by the Marxists now. And they want to control all of our speech, and Elon Musk is having none of it. And for that, I say, thank you, my friend. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got about how much time? 5 minutes left. Let's see what I want to get to here. Tonight on the extension, flat Earth versus round Earth. I found this great discussion between a bunch of flat earthers, if you want to talk about both sides of the story, between a bunch of flat earthers, renowned flat earthers, actually, well, not renowned, well known, let's say, and a bunch of scientists talking about the difference between their philosophies and trying to come to some kind of an agreement here. One side trying to convince the other. It's actually quite interesting for you All Access members. That's coming up after 9 o'clock Central on shadowdavis.com. It's called The Extension. If you're an All Access member, I'll see you there. If you're not, why are you not an All Access member? Charges dropped. This story came out last week. I missed it. This story is about 50 Freedom Convoy-inspired truckers who had their charges dropped on lifesitenews.com here. According to the Democracy Fund, 50 truckers who protested COVID mandates by participating in the 2022 Freedom Convoy blockade protests have seen their tickets dropped. In a press release, the Democracy Fund announced that in partnership with Williamson Law, it's able to successfully defend against the tickets issued under Canada's use of highway and rules of road regulation and other regulatory statutes for some 50 or so truckers who protested at the Coutts, Alberta border with the U.S. state of Montana a couple years ago. WL lawyers requested disclosure and held multiple discussions with the Crown, resulting in the withdrawal of tickets for all but 11 cases. As for the remaining 11, the Crown was determined to proceed with them, so TDF, with WL's help, sought subpoenas for the Alberta Premier's Office, Alberta Sheriff's, Edmonton Police Service, Criminal Intelligence Service Alberta, and Provincial Security and Intelligence Office to give evidence in respect of disclosure issues. TDF observed that because of seeking the subpoenas along with additional discussions with the Defense Counsel, it was able to resolve the 11 remaining tickets for only $1 each. As a result, no client was convicted at trial and all matters were successfully resolved. Good job, Democracy Fund. Look at this headline on the CBC today. Rural Manitoba communities plead with province for help cleaning up used needles. More than 500,000 needles handed out over the past year in a town of 4,000, says Swan River Mayor. Apparently, there are local shop owners in Swan River who have to take a shovel seriously before, and they shovel the needles out of the way before walking into their stores every single morning. Here is our friend Raylan Fox. She is an advocate for parental rights, and she speaks out on every platform available. She's on Rumble, she's on X, she's on Facebook, she's on YouTube. Her name is spelled Raelyn Fox with one X. She's been on the show before. You guys should follow her. Listen to what she has to say here.
So a little while back, I shone a light on the fact that CIRC, which was renamed from Planned Parenthood a number of years ago, was heavily involved in guiding our sexuality education in our public schools here in Manitoba. So I was messing around on Facebook today and came across a webinar that they're hosting. Check this out. Gender-based violence, de-radicalization, and chauvinism. Now, I'm not even going to get one word in before interrupting. It says incels. Now, I'm going to be very honest that I had to actually look this word up, but it is defined as a person, usually a man, who regards himself or herself as being involuntarily celibate and typically expresses extreme resentment and hostility toward those who are sexually active. Seems a little bit backwards to me, but let's continue. Pickup artists. Now, I'm drawing the assumption that this is the typical slang term for someone seeking to seduce someone else. Anyway, and trad wives, which I believe is short for traditional wives, all rely on a radical gender ideology. Oh, you mean like women don't have penises and men can't get pregnant? So I'm drawing the assumption that what they're saying is, if you've chosen to not be promiscuous and to instead hold out for a partner who has strong sexual morals, that makes you radical? Anyway, that believe in rigid gender norms that are often sold as natural or traditional. Well, I hate to break it to them, but a P and a P or a V and a V don't make a BABY. This trend of radicalization has shown to cause acts of violence. Oh, you mean that when people's very way of life is threatened by teachers and activists brainwashing their children into alternate beliefs angers them? Not condoning violence, but that's not exactly a shocker. Stop poking the bear. Now, I don't think that anybody should be giving them $50 to attend their webinar, but if anybody has any interest in learning on how to de-radicalize people who believe in the nuclear family, you know where to go.
Raylan Fox, you can follow her on pretty much every social media channel. She puts out videos like that pretty regularly, and she's very knowledgeable. Why? Because she does the research. She loves doing it. She is a strong advocate for parental rights. Do you think you can sell your soul? Is that like a real thing? Is that a possibility? Or is that just like folklore? We're going to get into that in just a second. Archbishop Vigano, excommunicated by the Vatican. This happened back in July for schism. Very interesting. I'll give you a little background on the Archbishop before we read his new plea to Catholics all across the Western world, not just in the United States. The Vatican has officially excommunicated Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith announced Friday, so this is last July. Vigano was found guilty of the canonical crime or delict of schism, or the refusal to submit to the Pope or the communion of the Church at the conclusion of the Vatican's extrajudicial penal process on July the 4th. So he's been in hiding for years, apparently, this Archbishop, because they're worried they're trying to kill him. And if you're a member, if you're an all-access member at shadowdavis.com, you learned the other night the difference between the popes. There's a white pope, a black pope, and a gray pope. And apparently the gray pope is the one that calls the shots. Apparently, I need to say now so I don't get banned on Facebook and YouTube that this is for entertainment purposes only. But needless to say that this Archbishop, Carlo Maria Vigano, has become a big, huge fly in the ointment for the Catholic Church. And he released a plea today from wherever he's hiding. And this is a real person, by the way. You can look him up. He's legit. Dear faithful American Catholics, I am addressing all of you a few days before the presidential election that will call millions of American citizens to the polls. Even in conditions of relative normality, the exercise of the vote is your moral duty through which you cooperate in the first person in choosing the person who will lead the nation for the next 4 years. But in this coming electoral round, just as in 2020, and indeed much more so, you are not simply called to choose between the two candidates who happen to be on different political sides, but who both nevertheless have the common good at heart in compliance with the Constitution and the law. No. In this election, you must choose between two radically opposed ways of conceiving the government of your nation. You are called to choose between democracy and dictatorship, between freedom and slavery. On one side, we have Donald J. Trump, who, despite serious problems in his positions, especially in the matter of abortion and assisted procreation, has as his objective the common good and the protection of the fundamental freedoms of citizens. In Donald Trump's America, every Catholic can practice their faith and educate their children in it without interference from the state. On the other side, we have a candidate and a party that promotes everything that directly opposes the faith and morals of the Catholic Church. In Kamala Harris's America, Catholics, but also Protestants, are considered fundamentalists to be marginalized and eliminated, and their children are considered the property of the state, which arrogates to itself the right to lead them astray from an early age in both body and soul. Trump's America can become great and prosperous again. Harris's America is destined for invasion and for moral, social, and economic destruction, the most ferocious dictatorship. Look at your country. Your cities have become dumps filled with derelicts and criminals, drug dealers and addicts, prostitutes and robbers. Your schools are dense with indoctrination and corruption from kindergarten onwards. In your courts, criminals are acquitted and innocents are imprisoned. New ideological crimes are prosecuted while illegality is tolerated and encouraged. In your hospitals, multinational corporations rule, and you are their guinea pigs to be exterminated or made chronically ill so that you'll be their perpetual clients. Farmers, ranchers, and fishermen are persecuted and forced to fail while the land is grabbed by unscrupulous corporations who transform it into endless photovoltaic systems and wind turbines to power their data centers and server farms where they collect all of your data, your movements, your purchases, and your political preferences. They have gone so far as to tamper with the climate by means of sophisticated geoengineering operations and devastating arson in order to make the global warming fraud credible and impose the green transition, the increase in the cost of energy and electric cars and scooters. And all this is done based on evidence that consists of lies without any scientific proof, but which are propagated through the servile collaboration of the regime media, ever ready to label any dissenters as conspiracy theorists. But what, until yesterday, was dismissed as the result of conspiracy theories is now admitted by the government itself. They take away your sunlight. They poison you by seeding the clouds. They overwhelm your villages and your fields with deadly hurricanes. They kill your livestock and dry up your crops with induced droughts and devastating fires. They aim to control the entire food sector to force you to eat only what they make available to you. This is what Agenda 2030 calls for, which has been imposed without any vote by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. In these 4 disastrous years of the Biden-Harris administration, we've had a puppet in the White House and a corrupt and incompetent vice president who has never stopped lying and deceiving voters about her past and future. Power is managed by the criminal deep state, whose names and faces we now know, that is responsible for the destruction of your great nation. And to ensure that the crisis is endless, new war scenarios are continually opening up in conflicts that no one actually wants, except for those who make enormous profits from them, sacrificing human lives and compromising international stability. You've seen what the Democrats, that is the woke far left, have been capable of in 4 years. Imagine what they'll be able to do if, instead of Biden's numerous stand-ins, his vice president is elected in the most scandalous and unimaginable fraud, with her entourage of LGBTQ ministers, rigorously woke, sold out to China or the World Economic Forum, sponsored by George Soros or Bill Gates, manipulated by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. At that point, dear American Catholics, you will not only have to go to a different rally, as Kamala would like, in order to say Christ is Lord, because saying that will be considered hate speech, and praying in front of an abortion clinic an act of terrorism, like it is in the UK right now. Do not think that these are remote hypotheses. Wherever the woke left takes power, it establishes the most vicious, anti-human, and anti-Christian dictatorship that humanity has ever known. And we know that every time the left has come to power, it has never left through democratic means. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, we're not talking about 2 visions that are a bit different, but still part of the normal political back and forth. No. We're talking about 2 diametrically opposed and irreconcilable worlds in which Trump fights against the deep state and is committed to freeing America from its tentacled grip, while on the opposite side, we have a corrupt and blackmailed candidate, an organic part of the deep state who acts as a puppet in the hands of warmongers like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, of self-proclaimed philanthropists like George Soros, Klaus Schwab, or of characters like Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Combs. P. Diddy. Their program is that of the global left, the World Economic Forum, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and ultimately the program of Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Their agenda is dictated by the financial oligarchy that controls humanity to the detriment of the people. An elite that operates not only in the United States, but also in Canada, Australia, Europe, and wherever politics is held hostage by their investment funds and their pseudo-humanitarian organizations dedicated to the obliteration of Western civilization. Behind these people, by now we should know this, are people devoted to evil, united by the satanic hatred against our Lord Jesus Christ and those who believe in him, mainly against the Catholic faithful. We want Christ to reign, we can proclaim it with pride. Christ is king. They want the Antichrist to reign, whose tyranny is made of chaos, war, disease, famine, and death. And the more emergencies and crises planned and created by the globalist elite increase, the more that elite has a pretext to impose new limitations, new restrictions of fundamental rights, and new social controls. Joe Biden, the current president, is a servant of this subversive elite and widely blackmailable for the scandals and crimes committed by himself personally and also by his family, beginning with his son Hunter. His vice president, Kamala Harris, is equally subservient to the same deep state. And the Democrat Party, to which they both belong, is the expression of the woke ideology that plagues all the parties of the global left. I'm not going to go on with this any longer, you guys, because you can go ahead and read it for yourself. It's all over X today. People have been talking about it. And he goes on to repeat himself a little bit there near the end. But I do believe that he's absolutely right. This is not, I mean, this is something I was saying a couple of weeks ago, as I recall. And it's the same in Canada as well. Even though some of you believe that Pierre Poilievre is the other side, I don't think that they would be going so hard on him, the media and the liberals, trying to come up with all different sorts of ways to vilify the man if they did not want him to take the reins. Brian Mulroney was a man who was captured by the globalists, by the elite. I think Jean Chrétien was. I think every prime minister has been. Stephen Harper somewhat. Maybe. And there's so many things that we could go into regarding this as well. But I'm not going to do that right now. I don't think Poilievre is captured. I also don't think that he understands completely the gravity of the situation that we're in right now. But he is politically smart. I will give him that. Do you think it's possible to sell your soul? Is that something that's been done? Is that done regularly? Or is that just something that we've seen in movies and television and read in books? Is it old folklore? We're going to get into that a little bit in the extension tonight. And also a great debate between flat earthers and scientists regarding the earth. All access members, I'll see you in 2 minutes on shadowdavis.com. For the rest of you, I will catch you Monday night at 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream. Oh, and one more thing. Do not forget, if you live in the WMR, that's the Winnipeg Metro region, you might want to come out and check out the presentation we're giving tomorrow. Ken Drysdale, Ken Lee, and myself will be in LaSalle at Kingswood Golf and Country Club tomorrow afternoon, starting at 2 o'clock, going through till 5 o'clock for an information session on the Winnipeg Municipal Region 2050 plan, what it's all about, how it's going to affect you and your family, and what you can do about it. That starts again tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock at Kingswood in LaSalle. I will see you there, hopefully. And if you are coming, make sure you bring your kids, your friends, your family. Everybody needs to hear this stuff. All right, all access. I'll see you in 2 minutes. For the rest of you, I'll catch you Monday night. Love you all. Appreciate you all. And I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.